wash away all your unlovely. Well, are you ready for a brand new discovery? Calypso.
All right, so welcome back. So as we have been doing over the past few days, we have been focusing on the public procurement bill. The Daily Express is reporting today that the bill becomes law today when it receives presidential assent. So we are now joined by Nirad Tewarie, Chief Executive Officer of AMCHAM T&T. Mr. Tewarie, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning to everyone in studio and, of course, all the viewers. Thanks for having me.
Mr. Tewarie, let's deal with the public procurement bill. Of course, that I'm sure that the debate and what has been going on with this bill would have been of concern, and you would have viewed it, your organization, with some level of interest, as we're seeing today. As I told our viewers a little earlier, the bill becomes law today. Is it something that you think that we can work with?
Well, I'm glad you phrased it that way. I think it is something that we can work with. You would have seen the joint statement put out by a number of groups, including the Transparency Institute, the JCC, AMCHAM Trinidad and Tobago, the Trinidad and Tobago Chamber, when the original draft was laid and being debated. Fundamentally, this is a new law. The implementation of the Procurement Act was always going to have teething problems because its implications are significant and far-reaching. And in assessing the efficacy or how well it's working toward its intent, which is to reduce avenues for corruption. And remember, the Office of the Procurement Regulator is not a procuring entity, but rather is there for oversight before procurement, in terms of helping to develop procedures that would allow procurement to be more transparent and clearer. And then, of course, after the fact or during the process, if there are claims of an issue or issues, that the procurement regulator can step in and review, and then, of course, after the fact would review. The question really begs itself, are the issues that we're experiencing today administrative or due to deficiencies of the law? And while I started off by saying we can live with the bill as amended, one still has to wonder whether we are tweaking the law in advance of really testing it because of challenges with the administrative process. And that's really what our joint concern has been. And of course, any weakening of the law to allow for politicians, not just today, but in the future, to have more ability to insert themselves in the procurement process will always be a cause for concern. Why I say we could live with it is that we would have preferred that they need to come to the Parliament for affirmative resolution to change the regulations remained. And when this bill was drafted, the original draft, the minister would have then had the power to just change the regulations, lay them for negative resolution, and then the Parliament, if somebody picked it up, would debate it after the fact. We had discussions, including with the minister, to say that was not, we were not comfortable with that. And the sort of compromise that the minister made is that regulations will be laid for negative resolution, but with the approval of the regulator. So there's a layer in between that in theory will buffer and ensure that any changes to the regulations, according to the regulator, according to the OPR, would be beneficial and make the process smoother as opposed to weakening the process. So,
but you do feel a
ideal.
little more comfortable with this new power being given to the regulator?
Well, we would have preferred, as I said, that the affirmative resolution, the need for affirmative resolution for any amendment to the regulations remain. But we have to appreciate that in a society, different people have different perspectives, and we at the same time want to hold the government to account for efficiency, a government to account. And I want to move this away from the current government or the
Yes.
last government, right? Because laws are not written for today. Laws are written theoretically in perpetuity. Of course, you could amend them, but the hope is that you write them well enough that you have to amend them infrequently rather than frequently. But having the minister and the government feels that process would be very difficult and onerous, time consuming, and so having the regulator as a layer and having the regulator to approve is a little more comfortable than a minister simply amending the regulations as she or he wishes. Again, that speaks then to the need to have strong and independent institutions, which the OPR is supposed to be.
Yeah. How is this going to impact on business? Because there was the feeling that the legislation was very restrictive and it did not help businesses, small, medium businesses, and I'm sure maybe large businesses too. Do you think that because of this balance, let's call it balance, that has been reached, do you think that it is going to be beneficial to business?
Yeah, so as I said, we have to separate the administrative issues from the issues with the act itself, right? And yes, some of the administrative issues still are challenging, and many members have expressed some difficulty in registering and in the process. So, for example, you need NIS and BIR clearance to be eligible for a contract. According to the Procurement Act and the timelines involved, it could take 2 months, sometimes more, between when a tender is issued and therefore when you bid and when it is awarded, and your certificates may be valid for 30 days. Which begs the question, do you have to get your certificates renewed? And what if you don't in that 30-day period? And that process of getting the clearance is not as straightforward as it should be. So inefficiencies in one department are compounded now by challenges in another. But these are administrative things as opposed to challenges with the law. One can argue that the threshold of $1 million under which the procurement process does not apply, and I want to make that distinction. The process of procurement now from today will not apply for the procurement of goods and services under $1 million, but they are still subject to oversight, right? So that let's just say you award a box train contract for $250,000. So the timelines and the process may not apply, but that contract is still subject to oversight by the OPR. So in theory, if there's anything underhanded, the OPR still can review and recommend action as the case may be. But that theoretically will make things a little easier. Our contention, however, was that under the regulations, under, I think it was Section 4 of the Public Procurement and Disposal of Property Procurement Methods and Procedures Regulations of 2021, there is provision for the setting of thresholds. And therefore, our original point of why do we need to amend the law as opposed to ensuring that procuring entities put things in place properly under the regulations seems to be in question from our perspective. But in theory, that exemption will make it easier. The second thing with that, though, and the thing to which we really object, is part of the argument that was made is that some businesses do not have their NIS and their BIR statuses up to date. We really do not agree and cannot support any argument that allows and encourages people who are not compliant either in the things that they're supposed to do for employees or the things that they're supposed to do in terms of paying their taxes to the state to be getting public contracts. That absolutely is unacceptable. And we have been saying repeatedly that what we need to do is widen the tax net. That is, we always hear about the number or the amount of uncollected taxes because people aren't compliant. And then you focus on those who are earning salaries and are therefore in the system, those businesses that are big and obvious and listed. But what we need to do is widen the tax net. So to make the argument that what you need to do is make it easier for people who are non-compliant to get public money is absolutely unacceptable. And in fact, we should do the opposite. If you are getting public money, we must ensure that you are compliant, and therefore the state gets what it's due and we can better manage our economic affairs.
Yeah, I suspect what you're also saying, Mr. Tewarie, is that this is a work in progress and it still has to be tested.
Yes, as we operationalize it, as we go through it, we're going to find challenges, and we're optimistic that those administrative things we can work with the OPR on. The OPR has been trying to, have a lot of information on their website, so it's available to everybody, and they've been responsive. So we're optimistic that we can find the right mechanism to allow the act to do what it's supposed to do, which is to increase transparency in the spending of public money, and hopefully reduce corruption, which will have a tremendous positive impact on our entire society and on new business creation, the growth of small businesses as well. But we need to work together, and we need to ensure that as we modify our actions, as we operationalize the act, we do so in a collaborative manner so that we build trust, and that any tweaks that may be required, hopefully no more to the legislation, but any tweaks that may be required, we are comfortable that these are being done with the expressed intent of making the procurement process easier but more transparent at the same time.
Yeah. Nirad Tewarie, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for your perspective this morning.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right. Bye for now. So it's time for a very quick break. But first we have this image. What an image. Yeah? I suspect that would have taken a long time to prepare for. Good morning to our viewer who sent this image for us. We're coming back.
Troy Coleman.